Hi, we are Homo
I wanted
sapiens.
to tell you something.
What?
I too have adopted a dog back on my planet.
That's great.
She's 5 months old. I call her Lily.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thanks.
I'd like to meet her. Bring her along someday to play with Roy.
Yeah, sure.
Hi, we are Homo sapiens. I am Alpha from planet Earth. He is Beta from the parallel Earth. And today we're talking about Leo Tolstoy's The Death of Ivan Ilyich, a novella, a short story, whatever you want to call it. This book is my choice, and this is one of my favorite books.
Of course it is. The central theme of that of a man on his deathbed looking back at his life and assessing his life choices. I'm sure my friend here likes this theme.
Yeah, and also a commentary on the charade we all engage in the name of social propriety, family values, social values, etc., that are revered in all cultures around the world. Story is set in Russia in last quarter of 19th century. Ivan Ilyich is a member of Court of Justice, a judge in court. Book mentions Ivan Ilyich dies in the year 1882 at the age of 45. The story starts with Ivan's colleagues, who are also his friends, discussing some court case in a private room, while Ivan's lifelong friend, Pyotr Ivanovich, ignoring the discussion, reads a newspaper, and in it he reads that Ivan Ilyich is dead. News of death of a colleague and a friend doesn't seem to affect them much. Not even brief words of condolences are uttered by any of them. Instead, everybody in the room thinks, now that Ivan Ilyich is dead, his official position is empty, and how each of them can advance further in their position and might gain a little more money. In short, first few pages set the mood of the story. Cynical human relations that are based purely on insincere behavior towards each other in the name of social propriety. Comme il faut is the French phrase used often in this book, meaning appropriate behavior and etiquette, which is exactly how Ivan Ilyich has spent his entire life, described in later chapters. Comme il faut. Tolstoy portrays the death of Ivan Ilyich becomes just a minor inconvenience for his friends now that they have to make a condolence visit to the family and perhaps will miss their playing game of cards that night. Pyotr Ivanovich, close friend of Ivan, ends up visiting Ivan's widow, Praskovia Fyodorowna Golovina. Their interaction is as it should be. She plays a part of mourning widow, he plays a part of caring friend. But inside him, he carries a schadenfreude that it's Ivan who is dead and not I, that I can still perhaps make it to evening game of cards after this visit. And the widow, after initial appropriate exchanges with this friend of Ivan, quietly inquires if she can make more money from government on account of her husband's death. In short, both wife and friend of Ivan are least bothered by his death, but are more interested in their own immediate self-interest. Ivan Ilyich, a child of an upper middle-class family, is smart and agreeable child who follows all social norms. He completes his law school education as is required and leads a dutiful life. Duty as defined by higher authorities. As a young lawyer, he spends his time being happy with himself, doing everything that is socially agreeable and acceptable. He also gets married just because the kind of superior society he aspires for approves of such a match. And his interactions with others in his society happens with certain French phrases uttered now and then, just to show that he belongs to that superior class. He wrongly assumes that bliss of conjugal life would last longer, and soon his life is disturbed by his wife's jealousy, demanding attention and unnecessary arguments. So he escapes himself into his official duties to avoid her. Birth of their first child doesn't help much in their relationship. Wife grows more and more irritable, and Ivan Ilyich isolates himself more and more from family and finds comfort in his official duties and playing cards with friends. After a few years of marriage and only 2 of their several children surviving, Ivan Ilyich is transferred to other post. His salary goes up, but so are their expenses. And wife constantly complains about husband's incompetency, and she doesn't like the new town. Years went by, and 17 years after married life, he still finds himself being unhappy in family life. By now, Ivan Ilyich becomes a senior public prosecutor and is hoping for a big post of becoming a judge. Then comes the worst year of his life. A post of judge promised to him is given to someone else, and that makes Ivan livid. His salary of 3,000 rubles is highly insufficient to meet his family's needs, and he finds himself under the mounting burden of debt. Even his father doesn't help him. He feels deserted by everyone and feels a sense of injustice done to him. But then things change. A new position opens up in a new town, and Ivan Ilyich gets what he wants, a post of judge and 5,000 rubles as salary. Things become easy. With change of fortune, his wife turns agreeable towards him. Family is excited to begin life in new town and new home, which Ivan Ilyich takes upon him to decorate himself so he can impress his wife and daughter with his sophisticated taste in decoration. And during one such decoration, while telling a worker how to put on a curtain on a window, Ivan Ilyich climbs up a ladder and slips down and hurts himself in the stomach. First, he brushes it aside as a minor accident, but this small injury in stomach later on becomes a major source of pain and discomfort for him. Gradually, the family settles in the new town, acquiring new habits and making new friends. Tolstoy describes them as a family that is not actually rich, but wants to come across as rich. They keep acquaintances that are rich and try to reduce contacts with seemingly poor families. They throw parties and invite seemingly rich folks and shunning the poor folks. During one such party, a major argument between Ivan Ilyich and his wife breaks out over the price of cake, wherein Ivan orders a costly cake, something his wife disapproves, and she ends up calling him a fool. This minor incident escalates between them, and to the point Ivan Ilyich threatens to divorce her. This little disharmony gradually manifests into Ivan Ilyich suffering more and more stomach pain at the exact spot where he hurt himself while hanging the curtain. His health gradually deteriorates. Ivan Ilyich first tries to forget that anything is wrong with him. Then, as it dawns upon him, slowly, he tries to deny that anything could possibly go wrong with him. But as the people around him, their long stares at him and their actions that seem deliberately kind towards him, he realizes that perhaps they know something that he is denying to himself, that he is sicker than he admits to himself. Gradually, as it dawns upon him that he is going to die, his sense of self-importance that he has cultivated throughout his life as an important man starts to crumble down, and he cannot make peace with that. He struggles with great anguish to accept his mortality. He personifies death and calls it as it. It stays with him all the time, and he's afraid of it. His family and friends come to realize that he is going to die, and they just wish it happened quickly so that it won't be much of an inconvenience to them and they can carry on with their lives. In spite of thinking this way, they all pretend he's just sick and will recover soon. Ivan Ilyich knows that they all are lying to him, and their deceptive behavior is the major source of his agony. All he expects from them is sympathy and heartfelt consolation, but all he gets is lies and deception, and that makes him angry with everyone around him. His illness progresses to the point where he is confined to bed, and all his bodily functions happen with the help of his butler's assistant named Gerasim, a young and healthy peasant boy with bright white teeth. Ivan Ilyich envies Gerasim for his health and vitality. Ivan Ilyich grows fond of this peasant boy, Gerasim, who cleans Ivan Ilyic's toilet pot, washes his body, and serves him with kindness and understanding. Gerasim doesn't pretend like Ivan's family. Gerasim knows Ivan is dying, and that reflects in his action as he takes care of Ivan's bodily needs, as one should for a dying man. Ivan Ilyich likes Gerasim's honesty and kindness. Finally, being helpless, Ivan Ilyich, when he is alone, cries like a little child and questions why he suffers, why the pain. And a voice from inside him asks him, "What do you want?" And Ivan answers, "What do I want? I want to live, not to suffer, to live as I have always lived, good and happy." But as Ivan recalls his life, was it really good and happy? It seems to him only his childhood was truly happy. Here I would like to quote a few lines from this novella as Ivan comes to his final realization about his life. Quote, "And in his imagination he started to run through the best times of his happy life. But what was strange was that all the best times of his happy life no longer seemed anything like what they had been before. Nothing did, except the first recollections of his childhood. There, in his childhood, there was something truly happy that he could have lived with if it returned. But the person living out that happiness no longer existed. It was like remembering someone quite different. At the point where he, today's Ivan Ilyich, began to emerge, all the pleasures that had seemed so real melted away and now before his eyes and turned into something trivial and often disgusting. And the further he was from childhood, the nearer he got to the present day, the more trivial and dubious his pleasures appeared. It started with law school. That had retained a little something that was still really good. There was fun, there was friendship, there was hope. But in the last years, the good times had become more exceptional. Then, at the beginning of his service with the governor, some good times came again, memories of making love to a woman. Then it became all confused, and the good times were not so many. After that, there were fewer still. The further he went, the fewer there were. Marriage, an accident, and such a disappointment, and his wife's bad breath, and all that sensuality and hypocrisy, and the deadliness of his working life, and those money worries, going on for a year, 2 years, 10, 20, always the same old story. And the longer it went on, the deadlier it became." Unquote. Book ends with Ivan Ilyich finding peace in himself, forgiving everybody and realizing that it was him who was wrong all along. He questions his life and understands his own folly. He should have lived his life as he thought fit and not as his society commanded. As I said earlier, the novella is Tolstoy's commentary on every man who lives by his contemporary society's obligations. Tolstoy wants readers to think for themselves and question social conventions that are insincere and not to waste life pursuing what others consider as rewards like social positions, money, etc. I think you'll like this book because it justifies your misanthropy. Book talks about people around Ivan Ilyich in a negative way. Ivan, while in his deathbed, expects sympathy from family and friends, and they seem not to be sympathetic with him, and that makes him angry for their indifference towards him. But if Ivan himself had treated everybody around him with sympathy, kindness, understanding, they would have reciprocated. In my understanding, it is his fault that he failed to cultivate loving, caring, and understanding relationships. You missed the point, an important one. He is not lamenting others out of his misanthropy. He is lamenting the whole social structure that rewards hypocrisy and insincerity towards each other. Social structure that encourages to see other persons as merely means to be utilized to your own benefit. Ivan Ilyich has done the same whole life, his entire life. That's why I read out those few last lines from the book. Only his childhood was happy because he had not learned the ways of social hypocrisy and insincerity. But as he grew old, he learned them, and hence he couldn't be happy really with himself. As I said earlier, this is one of my favorite books. I have read it several times. The book is my memento mori. Every time I read this book, I grow much happier and more aware as a human being, aware that death will happen to me as well, unexpectedly, at any time, and therefore I must make most of my limited time here. Must become more aware, more empathetic, much kinder to all living creatures, grow in my consciousness. Your statement started morbid but ended, thankfully, with wise words. Your preoccupation with death is morbid, but if your awareness of death leads you to grow wise, then that is commendable. Now, while I am happy that such a simple book works for you as a memento mori and helps you grow wise, forgive me for asking this. You claim to be misanthrope. You don't like humanity. How can you grow? How can you claim to grow more empathetic and kinder? I am still growing in my consciousness. I haven't grown to the point where I'd accept humanity as it is. I love nature and I love animals. It's humans, Homo sapiens, that I don't like. To quote Jean Paul Sartre, hell is other people.
I hope one day you grow more empathetic and kinder towards humanity as well. And for that, you must read more cheerful and hopeful books. This one certainly didn't help.
So that's all for now. Bye.
Did you see NASA's Perseverance has landed on Mars?
Yes, I saw, and I'm very happy about it. Looking forward to exploring Mars.